Hey bestie, it's time for your next session of Real Talk Friend Therapy with your favorite big sister auntie queen, Daysha Veronica. What up, y'all? How are we doing as we enter into this Taurus season? I'm actually kind of excited because after getting through this vicious retrograde, like truly vicious, I feel like the grounded earthiness of Taurus season is already helping me get my mind right and all of my ducks in a row, which, hold up. Speaking of which, I need to make a huge correction. So on the last episode, I was telling a story and I called a certain somebody in my life just a friend. My best friend, Kendall. Look, almost did it again. Caught myself. So I called Kendall just my friend and rightfully got called out on the group chat. So I just need y'all to know, I told Kendall I would make sure that it would be known to the world that Kendall is not just a friend. Kendall is very much one of my best friends, a high school best friend at that, and someone who I cannot wait to have on a future Why Are We Friends episode. But, just had to make that clear. Shout out to you, Kendall. I made sure the world knows. It's actually so funny. I remember we went to this influencer party gathering thing in LA, and we were talking to this girl who was like 10 years younger than us, maybe. She's definitely younger than us, about how we had been friends since high school. And I tell you, the look on this girl's face, she was like, I hated everyone that I went to high school with. Like, there is nobody that I know from high school that I would ever be in touch with. And honestly, it made me feel so sad for her. Not in a pity way, but I just know that she's not alone in feeling that way. I feel like that's a big thing with Gen Z. I actually have complicated feelings about my high school experience that we'll definitely get into later. But I will say that a lot of people that I'm still really close to as an adult came from being in high school. And they are actually my most avid listeners of the podcast. Hey, yes. So I'm really hoping that this podcast can be an amazing resource for future generations and hopefully help more people that are leaving high school or college develop those strong and long-lasting bonds that they are looking for. All right. For this week's episode, I got another new format for y'all called Friendship Goals. Within this format, I will be examining friendship dynamics out in popular culture and then, offering my little 2 cents, my thoughts and opinions on whether or not these relationships are friendship goals or a friendship no. I'll be looking at celebrities, movie and TV show characters, reality show pals, you name it, and we'll talk about it. So if there are any particular friend pairs or groups that you would like me to do a little deep dive on, offer my 2 cents on, do not forget to ping me on social media. Our first friendship dynamic that I'd love to discuss, I don't know if love is the right word here, but that has definitely been on my mind to discuss is the ladies of this season's popular dating show, Married at First Sight. 1, I cannot believe this show has been on for 17 seasons. And 2, I can't believe that I've actually watched all 17 seasons, every single one. Not in real time, though. I actually got swept into watching it because at one point in my constantly trying to lower my internet bill saga, it was actually cheaper for me to have cable and internet together. Like, go figure. And on Wednesday nights, there was literally nothing on TV. Normally, I'd watch reruns of The Office on Comedy Central, but at this point in time, Wednesdays were devoted to South Park all day, and I couldn't. No. So I'd put on Lifetime as like background noise, and that's when Married at First Sight would be on. This was around season 13, I believe, when they were in Houston with Johnny and Bao and Mirla and Gil, and I didn't pay too much attention to their season while it was on, but occasionally I would catch things with Johnny and Bao in particular because Johnny, he as a person reminded me of someone I knew. But the season that completely sucked me in was Boston. I think this was the second time the show had gone to Boston. And I mean, if anyone has watched that season, then Mark and Lindsay, Oh, what a fucking tornado of a couple. Like, during that season, it couldn't just be background noise simply because of those two. And then I just went down a rabbit hole of watching all of the rest of the seasons and really becoming captivated by the show, which is essentially taking the high stakes of being in an arranged marriage and putting it in a modern, I feel like, American dating world context. And you can see from the first season up until the COVID season, which I think is season 11 or whichever season they were in New Orleans with mass royalty, Woody and Amani. Oh my gosh. I'm like, am I giving away spoilers? I'm doing my best to not give away spoilers, but the show's also been on for 17 seasons. And for me, it felt like the show was so different from other dating shows out there because it really felt like the show wanted to help people find love. And it was just so fun watching people fall in love. I don't know how to explain it, but it was so beautiful and it felt so genuine. And I also loved that because the premise is so high stakes, a lot of the drama felt real and interesting because it's all the stuff that we go through in the early stages of a relationship, but it might be hard to put that into words. And another way that I like to look at the show, like I feel like the show always reminded me personally, I know my partner hated it. He like hated when I watched the show because I'd always be like, where's the romance? Where's the razzle dazzle? Like, romance me. Because it was just so beautiful to see these two people actively putting in work to like razzle dazzle each other. So, but yeah, either, you know, it would remind me to maintain the romance in my relationship. It would remind me to make sure that I'm like checking in with my partner about certain things or asking certain questions or things. It's crazy to me that we've been together for like 8 years and there are just certain conversations we've never had because it's like never dawned on us to have them. So I found the show really helpful for that. And again, I've been a huge fan of the show up until the New Orleans season. And then after that, it's like they got a new production team or a network executive or some big change happened at the top because I feel like, you know, it's a common refrain in the MAFS fan community. We like to say these experts have not been experting. Everyone just feels like such a mismatch, even just going into the marriages. So they have a matchmaking episode where they kind of talk about why they're pairing so-and-so with so-and-so. And then, you know, so just watching them grow to hate each other, it becomes so awkward and so painful, but then also so obvious to all of us who've been watching from jump, like, why did you put them together? Which now has made the core fan base, like, really even question if the show is in it for the right reasons anymore. All of this is to say that because the last few seasons have not had great marriage success rates, it has had tremendous success, however, in creating lifelong friendships amongst the men and the women who participate. And you know, in the past, it was always a nice like consolation prize to the audience that at least they got to walk away with solid friendships if they didn't get to walk away with a marriage. And then Denver happened. And I have to say, this past season will go down as one of the worst, most toxic seasons in history. Or at least I hope. I'm telling y'all, I already told my boyfriend, I'm giving them one more season to get their act together with this show. And then I'm really out. Because another big joke on Twitter is how we all say how miserable we are, and yet we still show up religiously every Wednesday. But this season was terrible, not just for how poorly matched everyone was within their marriage, but also because I noticed this dynamic amongst the women and that I want to dig a little bit more deeply into, where I felt like with the women in particular, they created this circle of toxicity. And I should say not even just a circle, it was like a hype circle of toxicity. And that's what I want to dissect more in this episode. If you are fans of Love is Blind, this season was giving Zeneb and Cole energy, where Cole and the men on this season, they were flawed, right? Like Cole was flawed. The men on this season were flawed. But then the way that Zeneb tries to stick it to him in the end at their wedding, instead of learning that it's important to speak up for yourself in the moment, is just this real problematic trait that I see brewing particularly among the lady folk of this season. And here's the thing. I love when women finally discover their worth and they don't take shit from people, but especially men. I am all here for that. But there's a big difference between telling your story and the chips falling where they may and someone getting roasted in the court of public opinion for their actions. And then it's a completely other thing when you're upset about what someone has put you through, and then you're manipulating those chips to fall in a way that makes the person hurt as much as you're hurting, right? Like, I love that Zeneb told Cole how he truly made her feel throughout their relationship. Yes, queen, be your authentic self. But then choosing to do it in the way that she did and making it seem like everything was okay between them when it wasn't, and choosing to embarrass him in this moment that's supposed to be in the name of female empowerment, that was the big issue for me. And as you'll see throughout this Denver season of MAFS, there's this similar dynamic going on that I want to call attention to, because while our trauma and our feelings are valid, I personally don't want to live in a world where we think we get a pass to engage in shit behavior just because we got hurt. And then as women, I also think it's important, I just want to highlight just being mindful of when we say we're doing something in the name of female empowerment, because it's one thing to cuss out a man because he won't listen to you or he belittles you, right? But it's another thing if cussing him out is just your first line of attack, and then acting like you're entitled to do that because somewhere in the world a man is being oppressive to women. You feel me? Like, it totally diminishes the hard work that our feminist ancestors have done to advance our cause. And personally, I find it so annoying when people hijack the idea of female empowerment as a cape for their bad behavior. It's just so inconsiderate, All right, so before I jump in, I just want to make it clear that this episode will contain spoilers for the Denver season. So if you planned on watching it, or you haven't finished watching it, you can pause right here, go do that, and then come back and listen. Otherwise, you've been warned. And I also want to call out that even though this dynamic happened amongst the women of this season, this issue of creating toxic hype circles amongst our friends where we enable shit behavior is definitely universal among the genders. All people do it. It just so happens that we are examining a female context, so I don't want it to seem like this is a women being catty thing. This is very much universal. So the American version of the show features 5 heterosexual pairings, 5 heteronormies, as I like to say. And in earlier seasons, the couples were navigating this experience basically on their own. They had no interaction with one another. But in later seasons, I do not remember when this started, but they started to allow the couples to interact with each other as a way of offering a support system, since no one else that they know has the experience of being married to a complete stranger. And to be honest, I didn't really see any harm in that in the past. I feel like it actually did have its intended effect of giving the show's participants the kind of support that they couldn't get anywhere else. But this season really showed how this approach can also have its steep downsides. I would say watch it, but that would be so mean and unbestie-like for me to do that to you. I mean, if you want to torture yourself or you have time to kill, then be my guest. But to just give you a brief rundown of the pairings. So first we have Lauren and Orion. So Lauren is a Black woman in her early 30s, while Orion is a Native American man in his mid-20s, and they were the only diverse couple of the group. Now, Michael, one of the husbands, I believe he was not white, but he was paired with a white woman. So at the start of Lauren and Orion's marriage, I totally thought that they would go the distance. It really did seem like the perfect match. But y'all, they did not even make it past the honeymoon. And it was just so telling that Orion was not ready for marriage in how he handled the rocky situation that they got into. So TLDR, they were talking about derogatory terms. I don't remember how this came up. And it's so crazy. So Orion straight up admits to using the N-word as a kid and, eventually learning that it was wrong, or he might have even said he knew it was wrong. Either way, he admitted to using the N-word. And then he brings up how redskin is a derogatory term for Native folks. And Lauren, not really understanding why, but then noticing that Orion was getting red because they had been out in the sun and then they were currently in the hot tub while they were having this conversation, kind of tries to make a joke out of deciphering the meaning. She's like, oh my gosh, like, I just looked at your face and it clicked. Something like that. Now, was it the best thing she could have done? No. But I thought she gave a great follow-up response, which is that in the African-American community, and I say African-American specifically because I really do think because of the legacy of slavery, it really does feel like Black American. We tend to be jokey with our pain. Now, that doesn't mean that he has to be, but I thought she offered a solid reason as to why she made light of the situation. And then you could tell the minute she realized that he was upset, she apologized, she heard him out, she started doing research to better educate herself, and I felt like she did all of the right things. She acknowledged what was wrong, she offered where she was coming from, but she didn't offer it in a way to minimize his hurt. It was just to give him background, and then she took steps to make sure that it wouldn't happen again. And personally, this felt like a chef's kiss of an apology. Real talk, what I wouldn't give to get an apology like this. Everything she did was all you can really ask for from a person when they've messed up, because it's inevitable that people will make mistakes or do something that will hurt us. So I'm personally not offended when that happens. It's what the person does afterwards. That's how I will judge how far this relationship can go. But sadly, homeboy was still livid. Not mad, not upset, truly livid over this. He gave her absolutely no grace, even though a white guy in their group had a slip of the tongue and made a remark about being on the reservation that had the same level of error in it as his own wife's mistake, and he completely let that slide, but not her. Then on top of that, Lauren admitted to him that before the show selected her as a future bride, she had a sexual encounter because, she's human. And when he found out, he insinuated that she did not value her body as much as he valued his because he hadn't had sex in over a year, because again, he also tries to insinuate that he wanted to be pure and virginal, I guess, for his new wife, even though it's you didn't even know you were going to do this over a year ago. But anyway. Oh, and then he tried to make her out to be an angry Black woman because she obviously had feelings about the way that he was slut-shaming her. So I'm sure this comes as no surprise, but only 10 days into the marriage, Orion decided to ask for a divorce. And honestly, it could not have come fast enough. I did feel really bad for Lauren at this point, and I totally agree that she was robbed of an experience because her husband made absolutely no effort and refused to try and work out their differences, which is the foundation of marriage. The next couple is Emily and Brennan. Their relationship is probably one of the most complicated because while Brennan was a shit husband and didn't really try throughout the marriage, it wasn't until the reunion that I think we all understood why he wasn't as invested and then had a smidge more empathy for him. Which, again, if you've watched this season, is fucking crazy to say because of how much of a shit husband he was. He claims he got a bad at it. I don't think he did. He just wasn't forthcoming with his true feelings, which is ultimately what screwed up their relationship and what put his actions in a not so favorable light. So Emily had never been in a long-term relationship prior to this, had never been in love, nothing, which based literally on the last season. They had a man just like this on the last season who had never been in love. This felt like a huge red flag as to why she was even chosen. On top of that, she basically paints herself out to be this white girl wasted, party hardy girl. I literally think on the honeymoon, as she and Brennan are trying to get to know each other, she's like, I love to drink, I love to party, and I have no idea where my money goes each week. And I think she's doing this as she's taking a shot. So looking back on this, I can totally see why in the early stages, Brennan would have been turned off. However, what can be really frustrating about this show is when people don't try. I mean, you're already married. Why not see if there's anything deeper beyond the surface? I mean, sure, she's horrible at PR for herself, but again, you guys were matched for a reason. Why not try to investigate why? And I will say these were my thoughts as I was watching the show unfold, because even though Homegirl sounded like a huge red flag, she also seemed very earnest in her desire to be married and find love. And you would watch her trying to get close to him, trying to get to know him more and move beyond her past. But just like with Orion, Brennan would offer no compassion, no grace. And then on top of that, when the experts would try to intervene, he was always trying to control and dominate and not say too much, and then also kind of block her from saying what she needed to say too. So it just felt like this guy was ultimately stringing Emily along, which has happened on this show, because he didn't want to divorce her, but then he wouldn't tell her why he wasn't attracted to her, because he didn't want to quote unquote hurt her, which, if again we're being real, is some bullshit that a lot of guys do in hetero relationships because they think we'll be devastated. They think we're going to jump off a roof. And I just think it's such bullshit. Like, there is a way to gently share what your concerns are. It's like guys only think that they can be mean or silent. And it's just so obtuse. It's so obtuse. But now, having watched the whole season and the reunion, oh boy, did Emily let her true colors fly? And we'll have some more on that later. So now my conclusion, my 2 cents, what I would say about them is that they both give Johnny Depp and Amber Heard vibes. Like, neither of them are good people. They both had issues that clearly needed to be worked on, and they sadly brought out the worst in each other. The next couple is Claire and Cameron, and I have to agree with the internet when they say that Claire was like the ringleader of misery amongst the women. Claire, ironically enough, is a psychologist, and so whether she was conscious of it or not, I feel like while she did not create the problems in her friends' marriages, she certainly did not help them. She did not do them any favors. So Claire and Cameron had a really rough start, because even though Claire claims that she was attracted to Cameron, she had a hard time showing it. She would make fun of his clothes, even though it was like pot, meat, kettle, because she would be wearing some of the wildest, unflattering stuff herself. She would constantly be nitpicking and overanalyzing everything he did and said, and whether or not it meant that he was attracted to her. And so then, because she would put up this cold front to him, he would feel rejected and eventually was just like, fuck it, you're not into me, so I'm gonna stay married to you, but I'm just never gonna be around. And I call Claire the ringleader of misery from my perspective, because you can even see it in a moment on the honeymoon. They're on a van ride to go somewhere as a group, and the other couples are all snuggling and cuddling up with one another and sitting right next to each other. And Claire and Cameron, at first, they're sitting next to each other, but they're not necessarily cuddling. And all the other couples are napping and stuff like that as they're being cuddly and cozy. And so Cameron like shifts over from like a 2-seat to the 1-seat to like stretch out. And then it becomes this whole thing with Claire where it's like, oh my God, why didn't he want to cuddle with me? He must not think I'm attractive. And I just felt like there's this glimmer in her eye that's like, why can't I be like everyone else? Like, Claire strikes me as the type where she cannot be the couple that's like last. Like, in her mind, she ranks all of the couples within her friend group, and she makes sure that she is not the bottom ranking couple, that she's somewhere in the middle, but she is damn sure not at the bottom. And so because her marriage wasn't working out, I felt like she was the ringleader in terms of like indulging all of the other women's negative feelings about their relationship in a way that wasn't helpful, or that I don't feel like they served them. And again, these marriages all likely would not have lasted even without Claire's, let's say, meddling. Even though I will say, I don't feel like she was intentionally trying to meddle. Or maybe she was, who knows? But like, it did feel like a meddling of sorts. Anyway, I felt like Claire was doing the thing where Emily would come to her with a problem, right? And then Claire would be like, oh my God, all these husbands suck. We got such a bad batch of men. They're so beneath us. And would also kind of just be sharing like rumors or things that she heard. And in a lot of ways, it just felt like poisoning the well, you know, instead of actually helping Emily through her problem or really thinking about, have I done my due diligence before I share this rumor with somebody that is likely going to piss them off? Because it's not like I don't understand where Claire would be coming from when she'd do that. You want to do right by your friends, but at the same time, I think it opens up this conversation. It's like, to what extent? Like, when do I need to be telling my friend about the things that I hear? And then, you know, do I just tell them what I heard, or do I actually put some legwork in? Because I just think it can be so damaging. And again, the intention is good. You want to do right by your friend. But like, I just feel like that's when things get messy, and there's got to be somewhere that we can land in between mind your business and I need to tell my friend, right? Like, I don't always think it's the best thing to just be like, I'm gonna mind my business, I'm gonna turn my head, I didn't see nothing. But at the same time, like, I feel like we can't always be running to tell people things that we hear that we just have no understanding of how rooted in the truth that it is. And so it brings up this very interesting, like, where's the line, you know, between mind my business and telling my friend everything and trying to do right by them. And I will say, outside of Lauren and another bride, Chloe, I feel like all the wives were somewhat picking fights in their marriages and making mountains out of molehills this season. And this is not to invalidate their feelings, but more so to say that I feel like a lot of them were just so insecure about whether or not their husband was attracted to them. Instead of thinking about what they could do for themselves as far as feeling more secure in their marriage. And, you know, for instance, I've always found this so fascinating about myself because I've been overweight my whole life, from like muscular thick to unhealthily overweight. So I've always been self-conscious about my body, except for when I'm being physically intimate with someone, which is like wild, right? Because that's usually the time where everyone is so self-critical, so in their head, and it's just never been that way for me. Like, sex with the lights on has never bothered me. I never thought about what my body looked like to my partner, none of it. But I think the reason why is because sex for me is about building connection and indulging in pleasure. And I'm always focused on how can I have the most fun and the most pleasure. And I guess there's also a part of me that has unconsciously believed that if this person is going to go this far with me, if this person is going to want to get sexual with me, there's got to be some level of attraction. So let's just not overthink it. And so then when I think about this other couple, Becca and Austin, again, I'm not saying that their insecurities were 100% on them. There are definitely ways in which I feel like their husbands contributed. But at the same time, I think that there was a lot coming internally. And, you know, I totally understand their insecurities. But I guess in my opinion, there's really only so much that you can make your insecurities a them problem. Like, there are definitely situations where other people and what they do and say can be stoking our insecurities. But then there are also times where the insecurities have so much more to do with our thinking. So yes, her husband totally could have been more affectionate. I will never deny that. But let's not act like there weren't some internal issues that Claire needed to work on there too. Because those two in particular were so painful to watch. It was like she was being so cold to him, so he's not trying as much. But then she's like, why isn't he all over me? But then she also doesn't see how off-putting she's being. A mess. Then the next couple is Becca and Austin. This is also another couple that looked like at the start they were going to make it. They seemed to have very strong chemistry on the honeymoon. And to be honest, I think they actually could have made it if it weren't for some of the toxic friendship dynamics going on in this group. Their biggest hurdle as a couple were two things. One, Austin was more religious than Becca. But even then, it's not like Austin would impose his religious beliefs on her, at least based on what we saw on camera. He also just, I don't think you would initially see him and read, oh, this dude is super religious. So yeah, it's not like he would impose his religious beliefs on her. And personally, when they would argue about that stuff, it felt like Becca was creating her own problems on that, almost like she was picking fights or setting him up to say things that would obviously make her upset. I'm sorry, this memory is so funny. Basically, Austin insinuated that because she wasn't religious like that, she was going to hell. But to be fair, it's not like he came out and said that. She basically was like, so do you think I'm going to hell because I don't believe in religion? And he said, well, and it's like, come on, you knew what you were doing there. And even if you didn't, there was nothing about asking that question that was going to be productive for anyone. If anything, his problem was taking the bait on that one instead of questioning her on how that information would be helpful for the progression of their relationship. But the second major issue was that, and it was so interesting because I remember when in the matchmaking special, so Becca has endometriosis, and I remember it being this big debating point online where people were like, how dare they put this guy with somebody who has endometriosis, because for some people it can affect their ability to have penetrative sex, and that's just a lot to put on someone, blah, blah, blah. But Becca was actually a very sexual person and very much wanted that. And Austin, and to his credit, I think this is fair, he wanted to build more of a connection first. He didn't want to rush into sex right away. And I will also say personally, I think he was a little overwhelmed with being intimate around the cameras, which I totally understand. And it's not the first time we've run into this issue on this show with somebody just being like, the cameras are a lot. Now, again, I was not there personally, so I don't know what it was like when the cameras weren't around. But I will say from our vantage point as the viewers, it just felt like Becca was coming down really hard about the lack of physicality in their relationship and then making it mean something that it didn't have to mean. Because even though Austin wasn't necessarily sexual, he would still like sit next to her, cuddle her, rub her, maybe not as much as she wanted, but I think like it just definitely felt like there was so much pressure being put on him about being sexual in a way that, and I will say there were times where even I was like, okay, Austin, like if you're not into her, then just say it. Cause like this is getting real awkward the way that this girl is just like, please bend me over and give it to me. And like I said, it's come up in the show in the past, and it's just so awful to see the way one partner will string along another one just because they aren't attracted to them, but they don't want to be the villain of the show. But then there were times where I was like, I actually do think that he's into her, but maybe he really is struggling with the cameras, or maybe he really, their trial marriage is only for 2 months. And so for some people, they need much more than that before they can become intimate. And I think we've all been tricked into believing two big falsehoods, which is that one, if a man is not trying to get in your pants immediately, he doesn't like you. And two, that being physical is the same as being intimate. It's like I'm saying I mix like intimate and intimins, but intimate. Oh my God. I'm like, where's my train of thought? So being physical is not the same as being intimate. They're very different. And intimacy is a huge pillar within the structure of building strong friendships. Intimacy is trust. It's when we feel like we can let our guard down and be ourselves. It's when we talk for hours and can enjoy each other's presence. So I think what messed them up was that Austin wanted to build true intimacy, while I think Becca's understanding of intimacy was only limited to the physical. And so her idea of building intimacy involved all of the touching and the sexualness of it. And so because Austin would pull away when they would get sexual, Becca would feel rejected and insecure about the marriage. They did end up saying yes to one another on decision day, which is the day that everyone decides if they're going to stay married or if they're going to opt for a divorce. But then sadly, about 24 hours later, Becca opted for the divorce because Austin lied lied to her about going to hang out with a certain female producer. Now, this one's a tough one for me because obviously him lying is a huge no, right? But because neither of them or the show, which is crazy, talk about how this producer was a threat to their relationship, like, you know, if Becca had caught them talking about really, really close personal stuff or gazing into each other's eyes, like, we have no background as to why him hanging out with this producer was such a big issue. It just feels like Becca ends her marriage because all of her other wife friends were getting divorces too. And without knowing why this producer posed such a threat to their relationship, it's really hard to gauge whether or not Austin was being a dog or if Becca was overreacting. But I will say, just off of my own intuition, I think Becca overreacted, and I think it would have been worth it for her to explore what that relationship could have been when the cameras were gone. And again, this is where I also think a true friend would have been that sounding board for her. They would have supported her choice no matter what, but they also would have reminded her that having your relationship filmed for public consumption is hella stressful and scary, and that maybe she should give him a chance without the cameras around, but, you know, also set benchmarks in place for how to work on physical intimacy and what she needs to see by when. And not just saying fuck him because all men suck. Because a real friend does not want to see her friend get divorced, but will also support them through it if that's what they really decide that they need. And I just feel like this friend group did not empower her to explore all of her options or consider other possibilities. But I will say that with this caveat that they did not give enough information about this producer situation, and I think it's wild. Then lastly, there was Chloe and Michael. Now, Chloe was not Michael's original match. Crazy enough, in the show's 17 season history, no one has ever turned away from a spouse at the aisle, even though there are definitely people we wish they had. But no one has ever been turned away until this season, and it was devastating. Now, in my head, I call Michael straight Curly because he looks so much like Curly from BuzzFeed, who is actually a really great friend of mine. I actually texted him. I was like, Curly, oh my gosh, this is your doppelganger. And I think seeing him get left at the altar hurt me more because of that. So straight Curly gets left at the altar and no one knows what to do. And then a few episodes later, the experts reveal that they found him a second match. So he ends up getting married off to a woman named Chloe about halfway into the season for the other matches. So straight Curly and Chloe were kind of on their own journey. And in a way, their introduction halfway through really showed how toxic it had gotten amongst the women, because the women were so disappointed in their matches, and in some cases, rightfully so. But then they took on this group faux feminist persona where, like, they all wore pink to the after party tapings, which is how do I explain after party? After party is essentially, it's like a pre-reunion where they have a few of the castmates and the castmates discuss tea and behind the scenes of the episode that you just watched. And so they all claim that they were silenced by their husbands during their marriages. And so wearing the pink and coming together as one voice was a way to reclaim their power. But what I found to be problematic about this was that when Chloe came along and chose to be her own individual, it felt like she was ostracized from the group. And that's where I got turned off. And I call it faux feminist because literally nothing pisses me off more than when women use feminism as a grounds for acting like a dick. And listen, it breaks my heart to be calling them out like this. Because again, like I said, there is nothing I love more than supporting women in voicing their difficult experiences. And I do not think that their husbands were angels, because even with straight Curly and Chloe, he put on all of these airs like he was ready for marriage and then ended up saying no. And I was like, straight Curly, what are we doing here? You just wasting everybody's damn time. But again, feminism is not about fighting for the right to be an asshole or they have this boudoir photo shoot thing that they do and these like other frilly things. It's about holding men and women in an equal regard. Like, Brennan was not a great husband to Emily at all. Like, the way he tries to act like he saved her life when she got into a bad snowmobile accident is truly the most Delulu thing I've ever seen on television. He's sitting there acting like he did open heart surgery in the snow with his bare hands in like -20-degree weather, when literally they had a whole cast and crew, and all he did was hold like a paper towel or a glove or something against the wound on her head. Homeboy didn't even call 911. And again, like I said, a whole cast and crew was there. So someone definitely would have made sure that homegirl got to the hospital and was going to be okay. But no, in his mind, he saved her life. But I'm not going to sit here and support her being an asshole at the reunion because she didn't get the marriage that she wanted. Like, homegirl literally, and I'm not paraphrasing to y'all right now, she called herself an 8.5 and him a 6 and said that America was going to be on her side in the end. Like, the experts might not have been experting, but this white woman was white womaning. Like, all over the place. And again, I support your ability to speak your truth and share your side of the story, but at the same time, I'm like, those two, so Delulu. Two of the most Delulu people I've ever seen. But yeah, it doesn't support your right to be an ass. And I just feel like the four wives got into this horrible spiral of groupthink, which is a psychological phenomenon where a group of people reach a consensus about something or someone, but with no critical reasoning or thought about the consequences or the alternatives. It actually reminds me of a CSI episode. I used to be a huge CSI nerd. Fun fact, I thought I wanted to be a CSI at some point in my life. I thought I wanted to be a medical examiner at some point in my life. That was also me in like my Delulu stage. But there is a very poignant episode of CSI that sticks out in my mind when I think about groupthink. This airplane has to make this emergency landing, and the guy is trying to open the door of the airplane and everybody freaks out. And so the goal was to subdue the guy, but because everyone is so fearful, groupthink takes over and it becomes not about subduing him, but they end up killing him. And so, you know, a lot of times when groupthink happens, it's because people either don't want to be ostracized from their group or they just want to keep the peace. And that's where Chloe really made the groupthink dynamic obvious amongst the other four ladies, at least from my perspective. Chloe came off as I make my own moves, I make my own opinions kind of person. She's not just going to take your opinion of someone as her own. But then because she wasn't willing to jump on the whole all the husbands suck bandwagon, I found that it then made it hard for her, or it made it hard for the other women to connect with her. And to me, that's toxic. So we're going to do a future episode on friends and exes and the politics of that. But in this case, it's a little separated from that because everyone on the show is a stranger. Chloe owes as much loyalty to these ladies as she does some random guy walking down the street. And so I know it can be challenging to see someone that you know enter into a friendship with someone you dislike because they did you dirty. But just because Chloe was getting to know the husbands in her own way doesn't mean that she couldn't have had her own relationship with the women. To me, it's not about choosing sides, and I'm personally really weary of people who make it about choosing sides, unless we're talking about violence. You know, it's a situation where you know that person has the tendency to be violent or is not a safe person to be around. Oh my gosh. If you guys couldn't tell, I am up recording this so late and my watch is telling me I need to go to bed. But, you know, it's a situation where the person has a tendency to be violent or they're not a safe person or you know that they're abusive. And even then, to me, it's still not about choosing sides. I would actually just be clear that as much as I love you in our relationship, I cannot be close with you if you're going to be close with them because it poses a threat to my safety for X, Y, and Z reasons. Like, I have a family member who has physically attacked me because he didn't like my tone, whatever that means, when he asked me a question that he felt like I should have known the answer to. He's never apologized, never taken accountability for his actions, and always tries to paint the situation as me having provoked it because of my tone. So I told my family, I do not want to be around this person ever. If he's coming to an event you are having, or you feel like it's important for him to be at whatever this function is, then just know that I will not be there. And it's not that I don't love them, and it's not that I don't want to be there, but this is my boundary, and rightfully so. If no one, including himself, is going to hold him accountable, then I'm not threatening my safety. Now, does that hurt me sometimes that I don't get to go to certain family functions? Of course. But I also know, God, this is so hard to say, it is unfair and honestly unproductive for me to put my family members in the middle of my problems with him. Because at the end of the day, he didn't assault them, he assaulted me. We have bad blood and they don't. And honestly, I mean, if knowing he assaulted me doesn't give you pause or make you think differently about him, I mean, I don't know, man. That's a you problem. I can't tell you who you should or should not be close with. My job is just to make my boundary clear and enforce it when it's violated. And I know for some of you, it's like, how can you be so fucking calm and level-headed about that? And real talk, it's a lot of therapy and it depends on the day. It's not like there aren't days where I am real deep in my feels and I want people to take a side. But then when I calm down, I realize how dangerous and isolating that kind of thinking is, because really no one really knows how to respond when you force them to choose sides, even when the answer might seem so obvious to you. And so for me, I have learned that it just feels like I'm setting people up to fail me. Like when Becca would ask Austin those fight baiting questions, like I've just learned that in order to preserve my relationships that matter to me, I can't corner people into being on my side. I have to let people make their own decisions, just like I get to make my own. Whew, okay. So on a less serious but equally important note, I had this really tight-knit friend group, but me and someone in that group, our relationship has deteriorated a little bit. So while it's challenging for the others in the group, and I say challenging only because they really loved when we all used to hang out together, they also respect how I feel about that situation for now. And they check in on me to make sure that I feel okay about them still hanging out with that other person. And I have to say, like, it is so kind that they check in with me. Like, I appreciate it so deeply. But I also make it clear to them that I don't want my issues to affect their relationship with that person, because our issues are our issues. And I know we want to feel like the side of a person that we know is their one and only true side, but people can be so complex, and just because me and someone aren't clicking does not mean that they can't have a great relationship or even a different relationship with someone else. But again, they also know that my boundary is that I don't want to do those group hangouts anymore. So it's like, I'm totally fine with y'all hanging out and y'all doing your thing. But for right now, that is not something that I want to be a part of. And making sure that they honor that boundary is really all that I can ask of them. And then make it clear that if they can't respect my boundary, then I'm just not going to show up to the hangouts when they invite me. And it doesn't mean that I love them any less, or that I secretly hate them, or that I'm secretly upset, because I'm putting it out there in the open how I feel. You know, it's just that I am responsible. This is the biggest thing I've learned. I am responsible for my own peace, and I will always do what I need to do to protect it. And so when we look at the Denver Pepto Pink Power Posse, it definitely felt like it was either you're with us or you're against us. And I personally think that's a really harmful way to construct that situation. And while I understand why we want to do that on a human level, Like, deeply, I understand that. I don't think it sets us up to get the results that we want. And I think the best advice that that group got was from one of the experts at the reunion, who told them to consider taking a break from one another for a moment. Because while they went through was awful, and no one is denying that what they went through is awful, they are also letting their experiences meld in a way that's not healthy for any of them. And it's creating this toxic hype circle. And I honest to God hope they really took her advice. I think that they all had positive intentions in being there to support one another. But at a certain point, we have to recognize when a support system is actually being more harmful than helpful to us. And if the friendship is genuine, there should be no issue with one of you wanting to move beyond the hurt and the anger. And to me, it's really troubling if your friends don't want to see you grow, or if they find your desire to grow and move on as threatening to the dynamic. So while I really truly do wish these ladies well, I would definitely call this group a friendship no. I think based on what I've seen, there's an unhealthy groupthink dynamic at play that is enabling them all to engage in a lot of toxic behavior. It's a lot of toxic hyping up of like very toxic traits. And because of that, no one is stepping up to call out the toxicity. I also feel like I'm not seeing enough individual expression. I'm not seeing enough supporting one another to think with their own mind. You know, when I come to my friends with my problems, one of the things that I love and really respond to is the fact that they never tell me what to think or tell me how I'm feeling. They hear me out. They ask me what I want to do about it. They might offer me alternative perspectives. But most importantly, the thing that I value most is just that they're like, I love you and I'll support you through whatever you want to do. And to me, that is real support. And of course, there are all times where we say men suck. Like, I'm not even gonna lie. I probably say it maybe like once a day. But, you know, we know that that's not actually true. And we know it would be so unproductive to actually think that way. And I think it's so important to have friends who know the difference between letting you vent and then letting you foster unproductive thoughts and attitudes. As always, feel free to hit me up on social media or in our free exclusive Facebook group if this episode gives you thoughts or revelations that you want to share with me. And remember, we also have a Patreon that you can join for exclusive access to perks and convos that you do not want to miss out on. All right, besties, I'll catch you next session. I'm out. Loving Real Talk Friend Therapy? Of course you are, bestie. So don't forget to show us some love with a 5-star review wherever you are listening, and to join our Patreon to unlock bonus recordings, videos, private chats, and more.